I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Morning, everyone. To our special meeting.
Andrus?
Here.
Lehman?
Here.
Underwood?
Here.
Brown?
He's there.
He is there.
Okay.
Brown? Can we hear him?
Kyle, can you hear us?
Let's get any audio problems resolved now.
Hey, Carl, can you hear us? We can hear you. Can you hear us?
There's something coming out of here.
He's unmuted.
All right. Carl, can you hear us? Are we muted?
Oh, we're all open.
All right, we need to go on. He's here. Yep. All right, so we're all kind of here. Carl is here, Rose. In some unknown, undisclosed location at this time. I would entertain an approval. Motion for the agenda. Thank you, Alan. Support you, Kevin. Roll call.
Lehman?
Yes.
Underwood?
Yes.
Brown? Okay. Andrus?
Yes.
Gilman?
All right. Okay. Anyone with a conflict of interest in today's subjects? Seeing none, moves us to our first public comments. Rita, I'm sure we're going to have something said.
Any person may make an advance appointment with the board regarding road commission topics for a regular or special meeting in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. If an appointment is made, the topic will be an agenda item. The following applies to public comments. Please state his or her name and address. The topic must be relevant to the road commission. Individuals are allowed to speak once for up to 3 minutes on a single topic, which may be extended by the chair. A group addressing the board requires a designated spokesperson who may speak up to 10 minutes. The board will not act on any item from the public that is not on the agenda.
All right. Looks like you're ready to start it right off there.
Good morning, Dan Olson. Speaking as an individual, my address is 14795 Mallard Drive. I'm very interested, to hear the discussion about the report.
Recording in progress.
One thing I wanted to highlight before that question was option 1, which is actually still option everyone's been interested in, which is East Bluff Road. When you look at that in the report, notably, it's the only option that doesn't have any kind of detailed cost estimate. All of the other alternatives that are laid out have fairly detailed cost estimates. This one does not. And I think if you look back, this cost estimate calculation really isn't much different than what we saw in phase 1 of the phase 1 report that came out, which was, as you may recall, the original phase 1 report came out after staff reviewed it, requested additional information to be placed in that report. And a month later, there was an addendum to phase 1, which laid out this formula for the cost of armor stone, the estimate how many tons per linear foot. So that's where this number of $160 per ton installed across a linear feet of 1,500 feet with 6 tons per lineal foot. That's how this $1.5 million number is being achieved, being reached. The only difference now in this report is there's now another $1 million added to the cost estimate. There's no details in there. And I guess we just hope that there can be some discussion on this because that calculation, that material calculation doesn't make sense to us for a number of reasons. First of all, there's actually only 1,300 feet there on the shoreline. 500 feet of that shoreline's already had revetment work done. And it's, don't understand why that hasn't even been considered and inspected by either GBI or the road commission. But more importantly, we have some really hard numbers that we can look at to compare. If you use this calculation that's laid out in option 1, calculate, let's take the example, the portion of Bluff Road that you've already contracted with AJ's Construction or AJ's Excavating. That was 240 feet, lineal feet. Calculate times 6 tons per linear foot times the cost of armor stone of $160 per ton. The figure that would then come out for that project would be $230,000. You were able to obtain a contract and award a contract to AJ's Excavating for $116,000, roughly half of what this formula is coming out to be. You take what Mission Hills HOA did. We did 200 feet. If you calculate the 6 tons times $160 per ton across that 200 foot, you would come out to a cost estimate of $192,000. We accomplished that same 200 feet for exactly half of that. And another data point that just you should be aware of is in the course of getting numerous estimates from different companies, we actually got an estimate from a very well-known, large-scale contractor that you've used to do other shoreline work, not AJ's Excavating, and not the contractor that we ultimately ended up using. But this company has done work for you before on shoreline work. We actually got an estimate to do Joe Road's property, about 500 feet of that because we've already taken care of the ramp. Coming out with that calculation, using the calculation that's in this report, the 500 feet at 6 tons at $150 per ton, will come out to $480,000. That company was willing to do that work for $225,000. So we're hoping that there can be some discussion on that, on the cost side of this, because it just strikes us that this cost estimate that's in option 1 may not be entirely accurate to what can actually be accomplished. The other thing I'd just like to point out is option 3, which is the cul-de-sac option. That option 3 is gonna have to be done regardless of what options are done here. Because you're always gonna have the issue of the end of the road and having a cul-de-sac. So the option 3 of just cul-de-sacing both ends of Bluff Road, that's gonna be a given. And just looking at the cost estimate, there's no cost detail or reference for the armoring that's going to have to take place on the shoreline. I mean, both of those, if you look at, when you get to looking at the plans, both of those turnarounds are in the worst spot parts where there's going to be shoreline work. And the report does acknowledge that, okay, there's going to need to be shoreline work, but it's not at all in the cost detail. So I'm not sure that the cost estimate for option 3 is giving us a full picture either. So I just hope that in your discussion with your staff and GBI that you can kind of get to the bottom of some of these questions. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Dan. Would anybody else like to weigh in? I suspect he said that someone. All right, with no further public comment, that moves us into our item 6. We probably should have flipped these, but we will need to, I think, let's first of all, I mean, what is our purpose? Let's talk about what our purpose is. We're going to close session if we need to go to close session.
Because Carrie has some information.
Carrie has, okay.
And she is here and she wants to talk to us.
So we need to be
about our
specific.
options.
So we need a motion to go into closed session for the purposes of discussing a property disposition with our attorney. I'll make the motion. Joe? Support?
Sure.
Alan? All right, we're gonna roll call, please.
Underwood,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Gilman.
Yes. All right, we will retire to another room briefly.
Just to clarify for the public, it's consideration of a written attorney-client communication, which we're allowed to go into closed session for under the Open Meetings Act. Just to make sure that they know that
Thank
we're
you.
going for a specific, we are allowed reading.
Okay, all right.
I don't know about those. No, I don't. No, none of those wives still stuff. I assume they're doing well. We're trying to get some. Baking soda?
Larry?
Right, yeah.
Okay, Carol.
Brown?
Here.
You got
Yes.
it yet, Larry?
He's on. TV problem. I'll tell Is it? There you go.
Okay, we have-
Keep going, keep going.
Andrus?
Yes.
Lehman?
Yes.
Underwood?
Yes.
Gilman?
Yes. You're back officially. And
Now I'd like to make a motion that we grant the Revnells their driveway permit with the conditions that are outlined, 3 conditions outlined about their access.
support. Hearing no support. Okay, all right.
I'd like to make a motion that we instruct staff to work with the attorney to create standards. Sounds correct, terminology.
Yeah.
To handle these situations in the future. That we didn't move-
To accommodate-
to accommodate
Private driveway
private driveway.
connections to.
Yeah.
All right, we have support for that?
Can we put a date, a time frame that we want it in the motion? Is that, again, I mean, I want to make, I want to do this quick, I want to do this. We can have it ready for the April meeting for sure. We have the public hearing and then for the changing of the standards. And then we would approve the standards.
No later than April.
And then at that same meeting, then we could address the drive approach according to the new standards.
You're just gonna second it. So
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if we can combine the two motions to grant the Revnells request subject to it meeting the standards, that we'll vote on in April.
So we've got a.
That,
The original motion, did you get that, Kylie?
I was gonna say, kind of, you get that kind of where
All
we're.
All right, so original motion,
will be subject to.
motioner has agreed
Right.
to the second and that, okay, all right. Any further discussion, Carl, do you have any,
We got Carl back.
I think we
Nope.
do.
I'm good.
All right, seeing no further discussion, Kylie?
Andrus?
Yes.
Lehman?
Yes.
Underwood?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Gilman?
Yes, all right. All right,
Can you help me understand this a little bit more?
okay, well, essentially, we have a limitation on what we can do directly, all right? And what we'd like to do is establish a set of standards that is as permissive as possible while remaining responsible to our duties. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to help, okay? And in the end, it's the hope of, I think, most of the board that you'll be able to get access in the way that you would like to get access. But we have to do this officially. We're gonna have to have a hearing and it's gotta be part of the process.
Just detail, so the standard that exists, right, allow for public and private road to be connected to to stub roads. There doesn't say anything in there as private driveway connections to those stub roads. So what we did is create a standard for that so that we can approve permits based on that standard.
Okay. And our permit is approved pending that standard.
It'll be subject to the standard.
Subject to that standard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, that takes care of item A and number 6. That brings us to the Wayne Show. Our GEI update on Bluff Road.
Thank you.
apologize, I don't believe that there's any way, real good way in which to kind of do this. We only have so many easels and only so much room. What we have detailed out are some of the options with the exception of the option 3, which is behind. If you don't mind, I'm going to take this off right behind you here. And I'll set this right there. All right, so thank you. So GEI has presented another report for our consideration. This report was in order to look at alternative analysis, which is a condition subject to Eagle granting any kind of Eagle and Army Corps of Engineers granting any kind of a restoration project out off of Bluff Drive. One of their options, or one of the things they require is to consider are other alternatives. And so that's what GEI was then, they set about doing. So this, a summary of these options, they evaluated 3 options in order to address this access and erosion on Bluff Road. Option 1 was to include a bank stabilization along section of Bluff Road in proximity to the lakeshore, including the area of the slope failure that resulted from the original road closure. If we recall, we had some numbers kind of developed in there for that option 1 of they were looking at for the stone revetment alone was going to be around that $1.5 million in order to, by the time you're dealing with additional materials in order to restore the road, the slopes, attain slope stability, riprap, and additional drainage features. They estimated that construction cost would be around $2 to $2.5 million. So option B, or option 2, I'm sorry, option 2 would, and this is where the alternatives come in, would include relocation of Bluff Road. With that, there was 4 alternatives considered.
Wayne, can I stop you there? And I'd like to entertain the board on this particular thought. You know, we've all got the packets. The people in the audience have gotten the packets. The public has the access to the packets as it is. We can talk for half an hour on option 2, but the reality is moving the road is a highly unlikely consideration if we're gonna spend the kind of money we've spent on option 2 at all. Because none of it includes the property acquisition, which is a whole nother issue. Honestly, we should just take option 2 right off the table. Relocating the road just isn't going to work. You know, if you look at the cost of option 1, which is the stabilization, or frankly, for me, an option 2 would be a bridge. You know, if as a possibility, but the cost would be exceeded, I think, by moving the road. I think it'd be a major undertaking beyond. So as far as, you know, we're looking at, ultimately, I think we're looking at the cul-de-sacs or repairing the road, or a combination of you know, maybe plans down the road for repairing and stabilizing the road. But I don't think moving the road is even, we can have the charts, and we can save a lot of space in the room right now, probably by taking option 2. Just my thoughts, I don't know.
But if it's our responsibility to obtain an Eagle permit, to consider the options, we have to consider the options in order to obtain the Eagle permit, to permit the work along the shoreline. If that's what GAI is telling us, there are paid consultants. If that's what we have to do.
We have to consider moving the road to get a permit.
Because they want you to consider alternatives.
Right.
I don't have any particular interest in the alternatives myself. However, if the government requires us, the other areas of government require us to consider it, we consider it, and when we're all done, we can say we considered it.
Well, it's been done.
It's been
Consider, consider.
Well, I mean, again, bridging what the two are saying. I mean, we've all read the report, everybody's read the report. I mean, how much do we need to go and just read the report and go through it? We already kind of know it. I mean, can we just, again, how much time do we want to spend just saying what everybody already knows and reading the report? I don't know how detailed we need to get into it. Can we just get into the discussion of that? I guess per se. Yeah. Right. So just to save you a bunch of time of going through the details of what we've already went through.
So let's talk about 1 and 3, or,
Well, 1, 2, I mean, we can talk about 1, 2, and 3. Instead of Wayne getting up there, giving all the details of what they exist in them. We already know what exists. We already know what the detail of
let's
them.
move into the discussion.
Maybe that's it. But they should be discussed and not just written off. I think is what counts.
One other thing probably just to, for consideration or to be aware of is the parcels, the largest parcel that off the end of Mallard Drive, between Mallard Drive, Center, and the other roads up there, there's a very large parcel up there that's currently for sale that any of these alternatives would go through. So what future development or what happens up there with that parcel, I don't have the magic ball to look at that. So there could be additional development up there accessing roads that we just don't know.
Is it possible to correct that?
Yes.
That's
Point of
been-
order.
Thank you, point of order. That property's been sold.
Please go over.
Thank you. Information is good. All right, thanks. Wayne. Well, as far as discussion of it, generally I'll wait to the end to hear what everyone else says, but I think on this particular one, Dan did make, there's a little bit of, there's a lack of information where the costs are, there, the breakdown of it for option 1. I'm not entirely happy with the way that GEI or the way that this has come about. I think we need more information, particularly on the cost of the stabilization, on the reasons for or against. And as far as the turnarounds, I don't have a problem with turnarounds, but I also don't have a problem with reserving the ability to open the road back up in the future if the funds, if they're not available now, if they're available in the future, if it does cost. That's just my thoughts to start the ball rolling. But I don't know, I'm gonna go around the table and you.
Yeah, and again, this is only like my third meeting or fourth meeting, and so this all existed before I joined the board. I did drive out there last week though, because I wanted to, in anticipation of all this, to just make sure, and I walked the property up and down and spent some time and kind of looking at it. The first, and again, I don't know of the Mission Hills in what the feelings are, right? I know there's obviously a lot of people, there's a lot of interest in it, but the first thing that caught my attention is the road ends after Mallard Drive access to their subdivision, and there's no houses that have direct access to this section of road, which I found just to be kind of interesting in the sense. And so to me, it was like, who benefits from having this stretch of road exist or not exist? And so when I left the property, I thought, why wouldn't we just build a cul-de-sac on each end? The people on the north end, it's not much further, right? I think it's an extra mile or two of driving to get back to center, and people from the subdivision just go south anyway. And so, I mean, what it does is it's access to their beach frontage, or their ability to drive down to their beach frontage. when I saw the extending the roads into the land, I mean, it's not only a cost thing, but I just don't see how that solves anything except for just spending a bunch of money. I don't know how it improves accessibility or traffic flow or anything like that. With the exception, it does give some redundancy. It does give a second way in, because then Century Mission Hills is at the end of a dead end. You know, stabilizing the road, you know, instead of building a whole brand new road, it just seems like you'd stabilize it. And if we were gonna move the road, we just move it 15 feet over to get it away further from the shoreline, then building it exactly where it's at, stabilize the shore, and then just work with the homeowners, which if that's what they want is the road there, then to work with them for right of way, just to slide the road further from the shore. But again, it you know, and then it crossed my mind, it's like, well, then why don't we just take from the cul-de-sac to cul-de-sac and just abandon that and either give it to the township for a park along the shoreline, and the homeowners association has access to all of that land for their own private beach, or I don't know. So I'm with you. I mean, it's either one or three. Two, none of the two options I just seem to be reasonable nor make any sense to me as an engineer that we would build that. Again, I do go back to Dan's comment earlier that if we're coming up and if we're expected to make decisions based on the costs of each thing, there definitely needs to be some work done as to the cost, especially if lineal footage isn't right and the cost to actually do the work isn't right. I think there needs to be some more work there before I feel comfortable making any decision. I would be comfortable ruling out option 2. So.
Carl? Thoughts?
I think, to your point, I think putting a new road in, I think that's off the table. I don't think that's the option that we need to spend any amount of time on. But I'm not opposed to the turnarounds, but I think if we did that we still should reserve the ability to, you know, maybe situations change or a pot of money falls out of the sky where we could actually put that back together and have that get reconnected. I think that option, if we did the turnaround, should be left on the table, you know, for future down the road. And that way, because we have, we do have some parcels there that have to be accessed, that is outside that association. So as long as we did turnarounds that would allow that, you know, I think that's probably cost effective, probably the best way to go.
Thank you. Well,
Somebody should talk
first off,
about
having talked to
gas,
some old timers
electricity,
out
and fire.
there and other places that used to be out there. Bluff Road has always had its issues.
The utilities gotta
Way
be
back.
maintained all the way up.
I would like to see better numbers for option 1. But I'm not gonna rehash what Kevin said, because Commissioner Kevin, what Kevin said, because Kevin and I mean, I'm of the same thought. I mean, the cost effective thing is to do turnaround. But that's based on this figure for fixing the road. So if I had a better figure on what it would cost to stabilize and fix the road, make the decision. I mean, if it's the difference between $1.5 million and $500,000, well, that's different than $1 million and $2.5 million. Right, so that's where I stand. I mean,
Sure, the costs are not probably accurate, and we probably need to get a new cost update, and we probably need to consider some alternate methods that maybe we haven't, that aren't standard to fix this. You know, I've driven out Bluff Road where it goes around the Bluffs development. The road's low and it's armored and it works and it's nice to look at, but every situation along Bluff Road is different. But whether it's 1 million or 800,000 or 1.5 million, it's a local road and we don't have the money for it. I think we've had some ideas. We've had, when Joe Quant was representing the Mission Hills Association, he spoke to us about, they weren't looking for a free ride. They had a real vested interest in this parcel. And they wanted to share in the solution. And I think if we get some current costs, and those are good, and everybody in the area wants to restore the road, we should try to restore the road, but the main stumbling block is funding for it. So I would suggest that we get Mission Hills to financially support us hiring a grant raiser. We've had Andy Smits, who's here in the audience today, who suggested a drainage district is a current legal current mechanism for us to do that. And we find a way to pay for this based on a current cost. Because with our township share agreement, what we can allow on local roads is a very small number compared to the cost of what any work on Bluff Road is going to cost, based on the preliminary guesses we have, even if they're not estimates. So I would like us to get somebody who specializes in raising the money, finding if there's shoreline grants, establishing a drainage district so that we can have some help, work with the township. I know the Peninsula Township Supervisor is here. Perhaps the township has some money available to pay for this, and we figure out a way to pay for restoring Bluff Road to a usable condition as a road.
You brought up Andy. I mean, it is a water problem. Yeah. I mean, it is a water problem. It's a hydrological problem. It's not necessarily, it may or may not have elements, overwhelming elements of drainage, or though that also appears to be a problem.
Where it's sloughed, it seems to be where we have, where the sloughs were the bluff, it seems like it's where we had major surface water problems.
So it's certainly something that we have to look at from that aspect. I would say that if we're looking at the option one more seriously, we cannot move forward clearly with option 3 because we just throw good money after bad, right? To start off with. I would particularly like to see a more direct, kind of look at it in a way that we can actually look at it as a real potential project, even though there are only a couple hundred people theoretically that would drive that route a day. But the idea, I thought, behind this study was to get a cost so that the local folks, the Mission Hills owners, and the people along Bluff Road, frankly, to the north, who might want that southern ability to drive. If it came down to it as a local road and became an SAD. With enough people who it does benefit, the cost isn't that much per property necessarily. And I mean, it'd be nice to have it repaired. But if we have to, in the meantime, we close it off. And I think that the 500,000 on the option 3 is probably very close. It's the easiest, fewer variables. Option number 1, 2 million to 2.5 million, 1.5 million to 3 million. I mean, it's all over the place. And it really depends on really what we have to do as far as drainage from the one side of the road to the other, whether or not we could obtain right of way and move the road over 15 feet, as has been mentioned. this is one of those situations where somebody somewhere, we have to make a decision. And
Can I ask a question?
please,
So where's Dan, the Mission Hill? So I'm assuming you're the Mission Hill spokesperson, right? You're always the one. So I guess for me, because I haven't been privy to all the meetings prior to or the conversations, but as far as Mission Hills, they seem to be the one that's the vocal community that is getting this project done. What is the benefit to Mission Hills to having this stretch of road replaced? Like what is your benefit to it? Why? Because again, it doesn't service your houses, it just services your boat and your dock.
It services several waterfront properties to include 2 lots that are owned by the HOA. And when the Mission Hills subdivision was actually built, platted, the plat was approved and built, there were 2 parks that were common property for the HOA. There was Teal Park 1 and 2. One is the waterfront side, the other is the parking lot side, so that residents could park their vehicles off the Bluff Road and not be on the shoulder and access the waterfront property. Within Mission Hills HOA, there are also 2 other property owners that own separate lots that are directly across the road on the waterfront from their properties that are within the HOA. All 3 of those, the HOA and those 2 other property owners, have already done their shoreline revetment work, which covers the 500 feet that we've talked about here at prior meetings. There's also 2 other property owners that own property that abut up to Bluff Road. Their backyards basically go down the Bluff Road to the north. The question of access, and we asserted this several times, and if your attorney's here, I'm sure she would be able to advise you in a private session. If you own a property that's especially in a platted subdivision, that road was part of the land plat, that land plat would not be approved unless all of those lots had access, vehicular access, which is defined by statute, to those lots. And so when we have been requesting access to our lots, it's separate and apart from the general public's right to travel over a road. As owners of a lot that's now landlocked because the road is closed, that road was part of our plat. That's what gave us access to those lots. And that's been black letter law in the state of Michigan for 100 years. We do have a permit that Mr. Kozinski issued to us. In return, we had to get a $2 million insurance policy and make the road commission an insured party in order for us to gain access to our property. We did that. Legally, I don't know if we had to. We could have asserted our right of access, but we're trying to get along here. But the right of access is important because we need vehicle access to our parking lot to be able to use our waterfront, which we still use every year. We have dock companies that come in and put in the dock. We have boats that are launched from that beachfront that require fueling and equipment to be brought down to them. But the biggest thing for us is that thoroughfare affords public safety vehicles to go north and south. And you have residents here mixed among us that live to the north of the barricade, and they have problems with safety vehicles coming down from the north to access their property because there's no turnaround. That embankment to the north has also become unstable, hence your reason for doing the shoreline work. Same thing for us, to have a safety vehicle to have access to our waterfront property should someone have a medical emergency. There's no way to get to there if the road is closed and it's closed off as a cul-de-sac. So the access isn't just a wish list for us. It was part of the plat. That Teal Park was built at the very beginning of the cutting in of our development as the main feature of our subdivision. So it is those property owners that have that entitlement of access. Joe Rowick's property, which is to the south on the southern end of that closure, that's currently an undeveloped property. And that property likely could be divided several times. She's not here to speak. I'm not authorized to speak for her, but that also is a property that would be greatly impacted by the concept of just doing a cul-de-sac. So I think we've been trying to work. There's a lot of ideas that we could still bring to the table that I know the township has as far as modified type lanes that I don't want to steal their thunder, but there are some other options out there. But I think that hopefully answers your question as far as. the
Yeah,
order of that.
no, I just need a
Long-winded,
little
sorry.
bit of the history, so thank you.
I just wanted it for my own, so I should make it.
How do you, is there an option to speak?
Yeah, go ahead. That's, right now, I think it's kind of important we get
Yeah.
one.
Just wanted to.
Would you identify
State your
yourself,
name
please,
again.
sir?
Stuart Williams, STUART 15163 Bluff. We've been watching movement on Bluff since the closure. So I thought I'd just add a couple of things.
Are you north of the
North.
closure? You're north.
Yes.
All right.
In no particular order, any deliveries made on the road, we've witnessed many times where 18-wheel vehicles, tractor trailer rigs are having to back up the road in reverse with no marshaling, nobody watching behind them. If somebody runs out the road, something happens, they back off the edge of the cliff. It's kind of primitive to get in and out. The other thing is the waste collecting folks and recycler trucks are large. I don't know if a cul-de-sac can accommodate, although in a residential zoning, you would have a certain amount of concrete rebar diameter, but those trucks are having to back into driveways at this time. But even with the cul-de-sac, I couldn't speak to that, how they would maneuver. We've had items we've tried to have delivered to the house that they won't even try to come to the house because of the inability to just keep going. I seem to recall hearing a conversation a while back about response times, and because of use of a pump to take water from the bay to fight a fire, that the extra distance to have to go and get the pump because of the closure adds to the response time. So I think it's really important that you have some kind of evaluation of your after you do the work and the concrete's cured, but actually you would like to do this first, is assess what this impact will be on response times, this turnaround business, the ability for people to get in and out, movers, just people buying a home that's already there and they send a moving truck in, a 53-foot trailer doesn't fit well. And we've had to meet people away from there in order to hand carry things just to get them to the house. So, but I will say this, I'm an engineer, I'm mechanical, and I'm not civil, but that's a whole nother world. But what you mentioned earlier about a bridge, I'm kind of fond of only because it lets the water in the bluff run freely. It puts all the weight bearing on pilings on either side of a cut that's already there, pretty well on its way. Those can be prefabricated. I've seen ads for them, and maybe you just have and another thing, last thing is I've seen a lot of cases where a single lane bridge, and if it's not too long, folks can see what's coming and pass on through. So I'm just looking at some sub-level options as far as a bridge. But it sounds as weird as it sounds. The road itself, from what I've understood, has been a real restriction to water coming off the bluff. I think that's been in the earlier GAI report. So anytime you can provide for natural flow, you're taking a lot of future failures out of the equation too. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob.
Thank you, commissioners. Just to kind of reiterate what has happened, I believe Mission Hills came to the township. This is our third year of dealing with this road closure. And there wasn't a lot of time, and I do think they have a compelling argument if we sue and all of those things. And quite frankly, the township attorney is on that side too, of suing for taking whatever we got, I forget. But in November, we met here and decided enough was enough. We need to work together with the road commission. Our fire department was here. as that road is gone, you also have fiber optic, gas lines, everything going through there. And when you, with that road not being closed, the people on the north end, you've added probably 6 to 8 minutes response time for an ambulance, for a fire truck. Our fire chief has written you, he won't bring those heavy trucks in that close. I believe Christina has checked and they won't send a school bus down that road for fear. So we've got to do something. Andy stepped forward as a drain commissioner. It's more than a road issue. There's drainage that's got to be done at the same time to keep it safe. And what I would suggest, since this report came out, a lot of my neighbors like Dan called and said, hey, that property is sold. We can't put the road through. Some of those roads are on conservation easements proposals, which aren't allowed. Another one comes through that lady's house, which the maps are old. It doesn't have the house on there. And it goes through the cluster drain system of another community system over on Bluff Road. So I think if we all work together with Andy, I'd suggest 2 commissioners, Dan and a couple people from the road commission, and we'd be willing to use our office and our staff. We can put to rest a lot of these options that they probably aren't going to be feasible. I agree with Jason. We just have to fix the road. And if we have to get funding, if we have to get in a grant person, we have people that write grants in-house. We've actually hired another one just for writing grants. So we need to get this done. And I think we all got to work together. Otherwise, we're going to end up in court. And quite frankly, I'm in there enough now. I don't need to go back. So I would suggest we work together and as quick as we could. Thank you.
I see Andy's chomping at the bit, and I appreciate you being here. As a drain commissioner, as I mean, basically looking at the drainage issues in that particular area, you know, mentioned, you know, the bridge mentioned, whether or not that's even anything feasible, but if there is a way that we can relieve the pressure from that hill, from the road, you know, because clearly the road is impacting the drainage from the hill. Your thoughts on this, what we could do next? Perhaps you could assist us in some way. We could enlist your help in developing an SAD or at least a financial package that could cover and maybe look at the engineering costs and what we need to do to start getting this ball moving a little bit. Because I honestly, I tend to move more towards the expensive option. You know, we're talking about redundancy in our road system, you know, with regard to Hammond and the crossing over the bridge here. And there is a certain redundancy, I think, that's important on the peninsula as well, for all the reasons stated. So, but we are limited to what we can spend in certain areas. And so it needs to be kind of a community coming together kind of project. Andy, can you help us, you think?
I'd love to. Let me first start out by doing what everyone else has. I'm Andy Smits. I'm the current county drain commissioner. And in full disclosure, I'm a past consulting engineer for GEI, for the Homeowners Association. I'm a geologist and an engineer. This is a problem that's related to groundwater, to surface water, to high lake levels, and to the road's location relative to those high lake levels. And let's just call it climate dynamics, because I don't want to get into anything besides the fact that there are things that are beyond our control, and climates, the day-to-day weather and the erosion that's happened throughout Michigan and other places is beyond our control. So a couple things I'd like to say after having said all that is what I've said both to homeowners association, to Peninsula Township, and I think to the road commission previously. The drain commission office can't do anything with respect to assisting without a petition from somebody. Other than the time that I'm spending here, which is essentially my own time, because the office is funded on a part-time basis. This is not a drain commission project that I'm supposed to be dedicating my time to. Other than that, we need a petition. That petition could be structured, and let me say that there is funding of $25,000 in the county's general drain revolving fund today that could be tapped to initiate activities that you've discussed, which is furthering the preliminary feasibility analysis, furthering refinement of engineers' estimates of probable cost, and narrowing down feasible options that would, as Commissioner Lehman has correctly pointed out, is required to go into a joint permit application for any work that's done under Part 325 and under the Corps of Engineers and Eagle jurisdiction. So the feasible and prudent alternatives analysis has to be completed. This is part of it. It's not all of it, because some of the other things that people have brought up are part of that too. The evaluation of whether or not it's feasible is related to emergency response services. It's related to whether or not the gas transmission line that serves people further up the road is maintained and can be maintained as it was when the road was constructed and the utilities installed. So all that needs to go in. I would point out that the Road Commission was a petitioner for the Cass Road Drain Project, which I think is ending successfully and under budget. There's some similarities between the projects, but having said that, the important element which differs on the Cass Road Drain is that there was not, I should say, an administrator at the time of that petition that had some experience with construction, some experience with contract management, and certainly didn't have an engineering background that can help narrow the focus of the spend of an initial petition to get to a point where there's enough data for answers and decision making. That's what seemed to be missing, is that it seemed to be from this chair a vacuum of leadership available in getting us to the next step, which is sufficient information to make a decision. And I think if there's a petition, we can do that. With the committee approach that was recommended earlier, there can be inputs to that process that provide control for all the parties involved with respect to fiscal decision making and narrowing of a focus and scope, so that you don't get to the end of a scope of work and still have questions. That is refined to get to the decision point. And it can be done in a manner that it doesn't go on for another 2 years, because right now, if we started today, in my experience, we're still, a whole construction season or more off for a solution. So it can be done. There has to be a decision to collaborate. And if the drain code is the vehicle to get to the next step and get to the decision data, then that's a limited spend. There's funding to do it, but it requires a petition. And the petitioner could be the township, could be the county health department, could be a group of property owners that have a stake in this. And I'll leave it up to you as to decide which the most expedient and effective way. But this office is willing to work with the committee to get to this in a controlled process.
Well, are we gonna be the petitioner, or is there's another?
Hi there, I'm Jim Ratio. I live at 14826 Mallard Drive. I sent the commissioners a fairly long letter yesterday, which you thankfully have helped guide through, at least in terms of some of these options that were on the table. I want to make a couple of comments. First of all, in terms of who should pay for what, I know Alan was suggesting, well, maybe the homeowners in Mission Hill should get together and help fund some of this work. we've already put a lot of money into stabilizing the shoreline in Mission Hills. And getting back to Dan's Olson's point, there's two different issues at play. One, our subdivision basically needs legal access by vehicle up to our parking lot and to the beach up there, not a beach, the waterfront. That's our immediate need. We're happy to work with the township, the county, whatever, for the bigger public good. And the bigger public good is Bluff Road is a throughway. It is not just a local road. This is not repaving Mallard Drive. It just helps a handful of homeowners. That is a throughway that's been there for decades. It's a service alley for trucks that are garbage trucks, whatever, ambulances. As Rob mentioned, we have utility lines running through there. So the idea that we are going to have to pay an extra burden to fund basically a public asset makes no sense. If this is going to be either a county, township project, or we're simply going to have to go back and say, hey, all we really need legally is to have the right access to our property. Because this road services people all the way to the town of Old Mission. And in wintertime, when Center Road closes and the bluff, it does up by Chateau Grand Traverse, there are times you can't pass over that. You have to come down Bluff Road if you're going to get back to Old Mission. This coming summer, we're going to have M37 redone. Who knows how those traffic flows are going to work. So that's sort of my main point, to kind of step back and say, okay, who has benefits from what? We obviously have the benefit in making sure that we have access to our property. And I think our homeowners are more than willing to help as we can as part of the public with the rest of it. I'm one of the several property owners that Dan mentioned whose lot goes down to Bluff Road. And I can tell you from the top of my property down to the bottom of Bluff Road, you cannot, it's not passable on foot. It is steep. It's full of poison ivy. It's full of all kinds of vines. And so from time to time, I need to get trucks down there, particularly to take out dead wood and stuff like that. We have a tree service. So there's a little bit more at play than just using the beach in the summertime and thinking that's, just kind of a side benefit. It's really important for me and at least two other homeowners to have that access. So if you go to option 3 in any form, let me suggest that at least the possibility, rather than trying to buy property that's currently in the plat, which would be necessary both at the north end and the south end, you ought to think about trying to work out an arrangement with the property owners and the HOA to get an easement. And the reason is, if you change the plat, if you buy that land, we have to go through a legal process with the circuit court. You have to refile the entire plat for that subdivision. It is a lengthy and it is a really costly process. At least it was when we looked into it a few years ago. So that might be an option on a temporary sort of arrangement where you're just getting at least permissive use, if not a temporary easement for turnarounds, and then keep the option open of reopening Bluff down the road. But we do need to have vehicular access this summer as we had last summer. Thank you to the Road Commission for doing this. So just please keep those thoughts in mind as we go forward.
Thank you.
My name is Jan Lewin. I also live on Bluff Road, but I live north of the closure. Stu and I are at 15163 Bluff. I am echoing Jim and Carol and many of the comments that have been made. I, number one, am absolutely not in support of my further dollars going to support this road. We have also been, as Mission Hills has, Stu and I have also fortified our entire waterfront at an extravagant cost to try and help this process. And we are full taxpayers. And so I just wanted to register my also support of what's been said as not a Mission Hills person, but as a taxpayer and resident along Bluff Road. And the other thing I also wanted to reinforce is that we are beginning to have our deliveries and supplies stopped. We can't get them anymore because the drivers are refusing to back up, and it's dangerous, and I'd like to move this forward.
And to speak to that, I mean, so we want this fixed, but we don't want to put any money into it. And are we at that point?
I've already.
I understand that
This is not antagonistic.
No, and I'm not trying to be antagonistic, but I think we have to understand that we are at a point where clearly we have been putting some money at least into the study that got us to this point, whether or not we're entirely happy with it. As a road commission, it hasn't been chump change. We want to make sure that what we do is permanent and solves the problem. As Andy pointed out, I mean, this is, stuff happens. There are a lot of things that are beyond our control. And it's discouraging to, when we're talking about going into maybe having, a committee or somebody trying to put together a package where we're going to seek grant funding, where we're going to seek other funding, which may or may not be complete enough to pay for the projects, it's discouraging to me to have somebody say, well, I don't want any more of my money used for this process.
You know what, I appreciate your comments, and it does happen. There's been 2 years that this has been ongoing, and the prices keep increasing and increasing and increasing, and I don't see a whole lot of action going on, all right? I am more than happy to participate and support, just as the rest of these people are, but before you or anybody starts to propose that there's further money that comes from the homeowners, I think that's premature, and I think a lot more needs to be done on the side of finding out the accuracies of what to me looks like it is completely inaccurate and based on information that is long past accurate. That is, this is just, to me, is absolutely appalling. That's all I'm saying.
Let's reel it in.
Let's reel this in. I have to go at 10 o'clock, I'm sorry.
All right. If we could.
More comments.
May I speak, please?
Go ahead.
We waited for a long time to speak. Give us a few more minutes. I understand it's a long meeting. My name is Dave McClary. I live at 14813 Mallard. And, I share, many of these concerns. I'm not going to reiterate them. I appreciate the fact that you seem to recognize that we need a lot more detail and specs for option one. That's been clear from day one. We haven't really gotten anywhere past what was thrown around a year or two ago by your staff with this report. So we're really disappointed that the report didn't give us that information. $37,000 for this, and now we're still talking about and asking about the same questions. So that does need to be done, and we agree with you on that, and we appreciate your support in recognizing that. Option three, I think it's just a couple things to mention there. That's where the cul-de-sacs. 2 things to keep in mind that haven't been brought up. I don't believe that the $500,000 cost for those cul-de-sacs would include armoring the shoreline where those cul-de-sacs are. Those cul-de-sacs that you're talking about are in the 2 very worst areas of scarce. And that hasn't even been addressed, again, in this $37,000 GEI report. We're baffled by that. Now, in regarding the option 3 and the pedestrian path, just to reiterate, that doesn't solve our problem of access or the public's and community's interest in access for all the reasons that people have previously mentioned. Fire, police, moving docks in and out, and not everyone in the area has a golf cart. So those are things to keep in mind when looking at option 1 and option 3. And I think most of us all agree that both of those options need to be explored further. But We also are looking at 2 years and nothing has been done. We have been to every meeting. I bet you our attendance is better than most of you.
All right, I appreciate that, and I've heard that a few times, and that point has been made. It takes, I've often said, the speed of government. Because we are limited in certain ways in what we can do, when we can do them. And I'm as angry about it at times as you might be, but you're living there. And somebody else said the other day, the most important road in front of you, the most important road in front of your house, is the one in front of your house. So we're trying to get through this, and we need to move forward right now.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, just one other thing. So along this 2 years, we have brought up multiple times remediation efforts that your staff could do to help prevent further damage to the scarps. That has been completely ignored. There's been no ditching, there's been no wattles put in, there's been no fabric put down, nothing. These are things that are not even, you don't have to go out and, they're in your garage.
They're in your garage. The GEI report, I had expected would give us some guidance on that.
Well, they have told us that the ditching is not a viable solution for what is out there. And the fact of what we would end up doing by the time we hit, correct me if I'm wrong, Wayne, we'd have to go so deep that it's not a ditching project anymore.
So we are back to.
So ditching that out is not going to help.
Where's the report? I know you're short on time, but that actually is not accurate because the original phase 1 report details that there's 2 different things, perch groundwater and surface water. Wayne can attest to this. There is a solution for the surface water, and they recommended ditching with an impermeable layer at the bottom of that. And we presented pictures of that retention pond that is full of water. So it's part of the solution. It's not the sole part of it's not the sole solution, but it is part of the solution.
Task force. Yeah, could the township petition the drain commissioner for this, and then insofar as creating a committee, we could pledge 1 or 2 of our commissioners to participate so that we can all be on the same page when it comes up to when we actually have a solution.
Well, before you can see the emotion as people are starting to think about how they're going to have to pay for this. Let's do the groundwork and find out what is involved in it, because, for instance, Mission Hills, by law, they have to keep their water on their own property. That would be a separate assessment district rather than the road. But we don't know that point because we haven't done enough study, I believe, of that entire property. But before we start petitioning for assessments, why don't we meet first and get a lot of this stuff hammered out, what makes sense, what doesn't, and approaches we can use to present. The last case, I'm sure the township would work with everyone. You guys, I know Jason, you were in attendance when we did this in Horizon Hills. We did 9 special assessments that evening, took care of all the drainage problems for miles, and in that built new roads. But the kicker, all that project was turned down. But when we involved not only correcting the drainage, but giving everybody a brand new road, and by tripping the road, that allowed us to bond for 20 years. So when you look at a 20-year payment that is very low, rather than a short-term fix that only covers part of your problem, that's usually not acceptable to people. But I'm just going to say, let's all keep calm. Let's meet and figure out what our options are really here, and what's the best way to work towards a solution.
Yeah, this isn't us against you.
Right.
I mean, this isn't a road commission against residents or township against road commission. I mean, again, like I said, it's not like we went out there and took an excavator and destroyed the road. Mother Nature took care of all this for us, presented a situation. I'm more than happy to fix it the way it should be fixed within the constraints of how it can be fixed, right? It isn't just, well, fix the road and the money just comes and I'm all for if that's the case, but there has to be things that do, because right now I'm all for it. There's a solution, so we should all work together to get to that solution. But I do sense this like, well, everybody's got lots of great ideas, and then it's like, oh, road commission, fix it for us. I mean, if the township petitions the road commission, it is the township's road too. It's.
I think we need some big brains.
No.
I think we need some big brains in the room on this. Kevin, you're an engineer.
I'm sorry. Is that?
Kevin, you're an engineer. Andy, if I could beg your participation on this,
I'm more than happy to sit on a committee.
Kevin, Andy, Rob,
Christina,
and if another commissioner.
That's my township,
So.
He's Dan.
Okay, so we got a couple of commissioners here, and then, of course, Commission Hills. Does that sound like a good?
Yep.
Do you have a list of that?
Kevin, Andy, Rob, Christina, Dan, and Al. Is that right?
All right, if you guys could coordinate and get together and start talking about what would need to happen, I think, to make that crossing work.
Somebody from the park.
I think that moves us in the right direction. Okay.
Thank you. And we've got excellent mapping systems. We can get the current maps, ownership. We can blow through these pretty quick. Why they won't probably work.
Yeah, you don't have to worry
That's
about it.
required.
They're done. Option twos. All right.
Thank you.
Should we have Brad or Brad?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Either manager or Wayne as an engineer, I think it's important. Yeah, and one of our senior staff people has to be there, so. And one of you guys can decide which.
Just a formality question, would this be like a workshop, which is, or will it have to be open meetings announced and that sort of thing? So that if anyone wanted to sit in the audience.
There's gonna be no deliberating and no decision-making done, so it's not gonna have to be open necessarily.
Gotcha.
And it's a volunteer committee.
It's a volunteer, right?
Yeah, I mean.
Thank you, Carol.
Robert's from the board.
Next year, she's like, cha-ching.
I'll do that.
All right. Okay, we're done with this subject now. I think we're moving forward. That's great. That takes us to our second public, Andy, please.
We're almost done, I think.
Okay.
I think whichever volunteer decides to host or call it to order, we probably should put somebody in charge of making the phone calls. Otherwise, everybody's just gonna be looking at each other going, what are we doing?
Right. Yeah,
We'll do that. We'll do it.
Okay, that's fine. Rob, that's fine. Okay. All right.
Also,
Excellent.
don't you have to make a motion to use that 25,000 to hire Andy?
That's what the committee decides who.
Oh, I thought it was a county commissioner.
No, that money is available only after a petition is properly formed and
All right.
submitted.
All right, okay.
I'm a volunteer. I'm not volunteering the revolving fund.
And thank you, Kevin and Alan, for, I mean, this is pretty big stuff. Public comment, second public comment, anything else? Seeing nobody jumping up for second public comment.
Motion to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you.